Hello, hello. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Those are
Hi.
some smooth vibes you've got going there.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I'm like, let's have some chill vibes before we start Open Source Friday. To folks who are just tuning in, thanks for joining us. If this is your first time watching, this is called Open Source Friday. It's a stream that we do on GitHub's Twitch and GitHub's LinkedIn and GitHub's YouTube channel where we talk to open source maintainers about the projects that they've created. It helps us to explore and discover other open source projects that we can get into. And if we're interested in becoming maintainers ourselves, we may be able to like pick up some tips and tricks from them. So I want to start turning it over to our guest. Introduce yourself, tell us about you. We'll start with Ole and then go down the line.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rizal. Hello, everyone. I'm Ole Lensmar. I'm the CTO at KubeShop, the makers of a bunch of open source projects targeting cloud native and Kubernetes specifically. And I think that's all I'm going to say about myself. I will say that I'm in Stockholm, Sweden, still longing for spring. It's still snowing over here. So.
Oh, that sucks.
I know. I know.
All right, Catalyst.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks for having me. I'm the technical lead on Monocle Desktop. I've been working on the project for almost 2 years now, and I'm a full stack developer. I live in Romania, and just to keep it short, in my free time, I like to do magic tricks with cards, but I don't have
He's
one.
really good.
Now.
He's really good.
Oh, that was a nice fun fact.
Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Răzvan. I'm located in the western part of Romania, and I'm a software engineer at Monocle. I've been working on this project for almost 1.5 years, and it's really great to be here.
Nice. Thank you. I'm glad that you all have been so embedded into the project as well. I want to say just highlight a couple of viewers because it looks like we have people from all over the world. We have folks from Louisville, Kentucky, but we also have folks from Turkey and Algeria. And Poland, and it looks like someone said, and from Chile as well. And it looks like someone said, hello, eager to learn about this project. And somebody else, I missed the comment, I can't find it. Oh, quite the interesting technology. Glad to see work in this area. So I'm excited that the audience is also excited about learning about this project. So, first question, what is this project, anyways?
That's a great question. Thanks for asking, Rizal. So happy to talk about Monocle. So the background of Monocle is something I stumbled upon when I started working with Kubernetes, and specifically when you work with Kubernetes, you have to configure the applications that you're running under Kubernetes. And doing that is you use configuration files, and these files are written in YAML, which is a common syntax for markup. And these files can quickly get very overwhelming, right? Especially for maybe not for a simple project, but as your applications grow and they get more complex and you're working with a bunch of different environments, managing those files and just understanding them and validating them and making sure that they'll work and how that everything lines up and all that stuff is really, really tricky. And although there are like IDEs out there that have plugins and stuff like that to help you, none of those are really got everything together in one nice set of tools, integrated suite of kind of things to help me, at least at that point, get those configuration files right. And that was the idea behind Monocle, right? Wouldn't it be great if there was one tool that had all that intelligence around Kubernetes configurations and workflows and all that stuff built in? I don't have to cobble together my own tool chain. I know some people love to do that. I get impatient very quickly. I just want to get stuff done. So that's kind of the background of Monocle, which we started, the summer 2 years ago. So it's not yet 2 years old, but it will be in a couple of months. And Kathleen was one of the first devs on the project. So he was kind of tasked with taking a wild idea from myself to something that actually works. And he's obviously done a brilliant job together with Razvan and others on the team.
This is awesome. This is awesome because I agree. Like Kubernetes can be kind of hard. And as someone in the comments said, YAML is kind of complex. It can be frustrating. And like you said, things work for different people. Some people do like putting together that suite of tools, but I really like, not suite of tools, but different like tools in their tool chain. But I really do appreciate that you've created a suite of tools where it's all in one and we don't have to like go picking and choosing from different places. I also think that's great for like beginners as well, because maybe they don't know about all the other tools that exist out there.
I think it's a great point. That's really one of the things that can be hard to get right. Like if you're using just a regular IDE, and you start working with YAML for Kubernetes, there's so much that you'll be missing out on that you could get from plugins or a tool like Monocle, right, to help you and get all these things right. So you might be really struggling with YAML syntax or with specific configurations for the things you're trying to do, and then you'll start looking, is there a plugin for this for my IDE? There is a plugin, but it doesn't work with that version of Kubernetes that I'm using, and it's not compatible with this or that, and it's kind of an unnecessary kind of uphill battle is kind of what I felt. I felt like, because I've been doing this for a while, I know there are all these things out there. Why don't we just put them together, integrate them, glue them together, and put them in an environment that can help both people who are new to Kubernetes really get started quickly and hopefully not make as many mistakes as they get started, but also experts quickly kind of be productive, right? So, but to your point, I love people who kind of put together their own tool chains. I'm one of those in certain cases. So I'm loving that diversity in the space. So I'm not trying to say everyone should be using Monocle, but there's definitely a case where Monocle will help and kind of really get you over some of the hurdles, especially Kubernetes, which is still so evolving so quickly. It's been a while. It's around for a while now, but they're pushing out new versions on a regular basis. The whole landscape around Kubernetes is evolving extremely quickly. There's new tools all the time, including Monocle, obviously, and we want to try and kind of help you navigate that.
Yes, I love that. And you kind of started to get into why you've developed this project, but what exactly inspired you to create the project? Like, when did you sit down and you were like, you know what, I'm gonna make this?
Well, I think it was at that time where I was kind of struggling with, with a pretty complex setup of Kubernetes configurations, and I felt like, why isn't there a tool that just visualizes these dependencies for me, that shows me that when I did this error over here, that would kind of told me that this is not going to work, right? Instead of me having to deploy my stuff and then finding out 10 minutes later by digging through some logs that it didn't work. And it just felt like this there should be an easier, better way of doing this. And I mean, obviously I was a beginner at Kubernetes, and had I been better at Kubernetes, maybe I wouldn't have had that initial challenge. But I do think, although the Kubernetes is pretty prevalent, I think most of the people with Kubernetes are still beginners and still going through that struggle. And a lot of experts out there, of course, as well. But most of us are still early in that curve. And then from my personal experience, I've had the fortune of building open source projects previously that worked out very well. So I felt like I've done it before. Let's do it again, and I know that I love that early, building new projects for users, engaging with users, getting feedback, fixing bugs, getting, it's kind of that whole mojo that you have around an open source project, which is so enriching, and not just the coding in itself, but just building out that ecosystem and the community and everything around an open source project is just, that's why, love open source.
Yeah, and it does seem like a shared sentiment among other open source maintainers that I talk to when they create an open source project and then they realize how helpful and like it is for their contributors or users. They're like, oh, I really love this, and like I think that that part feels rewarding, and they keep going. I also have a comment from my friend here, who, like, to me, I look at him as an expert in software engineering, but even he says, like, when he started with the manifest files, for months, it took for months before it finally clicked because the YAML is really verbose.
It is really verbose, especially
Yeah.
for Kubernetes. You can have these YAML files can get pretty large, and it's easy just to get lost right in them. And there's so many options, configuration options, and and when you kind of start looking at through with the aspect of security and performance and compliance, and maybe you have some, so there's just so much to keep track of. So having some tools to help you get that right is definitely great. And I saw someone commenting that you should be using a code like an IDE like VS Code with plugin. That's great, right? Whatever helps you, whatever helps you kind of get the job done is great. As I said earlier, Monocle being a more alternative, very focused on Kubernetes specific tasks and workflows and that kind of stuff. But whatever rocks your boat, right? Whatever makes you get the job done by the end of the day and makes you sleep good at night is great.
Right. Like, you have tools. Whatever tool helps you get to the end goal doesn't matter.
Yeah, sure.
And or whatever tool you prefer. So I know that sometimes beginners watch this show, and I want to make sure that, like, they're not lost and they're not like, what are you all talking about? Do you want to explain Kubernetes to me like I'm 5?
I don't think I'll try, but it's setting a pretty high what do you say, goal here. Definitely. So today, modern applications today are often broken into pieces that are called containers, right? So especially complex applications might be consisted of 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 1,000, even 1,000 containers that do different that solve for different aspects of an application. It can be logging, it can be authentication, it can be whatever. And the challenge is that when you have 1 or 2 containers, that's not, you don't need any kind of system to manage those containers for you. But as the number of containers grow and you start struggling with how do we scale these containers, how do we make them secure, how do we make sure that they can talk to each other, you need some kind of infrastructure to do that. And that's what Kubernetes does. Kubernetes is basically a container, not a runtime, but a container management system. I don't know if that makes any sense. But how hard can it be? That's what it is. So I don't know if that spoke to the 5-year-old in you, but at a very high level, that's kind of what it's there to do. It's to help you manage the containers that make up your applications.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great description. You said people use containers to develop. It helps to containers help, like, if you're like switching environments or something like that, help keep things consistent. And then you might need a container management system to help make this process smoother. That was perfect.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Let's go into, if y'all are ready, the demo. I'm really excited. I think it sounds like Catalina's going first and then Masvan.
Yes, today we want to demo Monocle, and before I share my screen, so we will have 2 stories that we want to show. One will be for new people that maybe struggle with Kubernetes and they want to quickly deploy something, and I'll show how you can do that in just a couple of minutes with Monocle. And then Razvan will have another demo where he will show how you can collaborate with your team, use Git, validate your resources, and see changes between branches even. I'm gonna share my screen now. 1 second. Okay, so here we have Monocle. I don't have any projects yet, so that's what I'm going to start with. We will create a project, and Monocle has a couple of options for that. You can select an existing folder, start from scratch, or clone a GitHub repository. But today I will use the start from template option because I will use a template that will create some resources for me without having to write any YAML. I'll have to set a project name, let's say GitHub demo, and then I'll go to the next step. Here I will see a screen with a list of templates that I already have available in Monocle. The 11 templates that you'll see here will be packaged in Monocle, so you will have access to them directly, but you can also develop your own templates based on maybe some rules that your team has, and then you can use those as well. Or there might be some community templates that you can install and use. I created one myself, which is a customized template, and this one will create a few resources for me. So right now we can see what a Monocle template is. It's basically a visual form that you can go through, and it will require you some fields to enter. Let's say the name. I will use Nginx as an example for this template. So I'm going to call it Nginx. Then the image will be Nginx latest. And I also want to set an environment variable maybe. Let's do that with Nginx port and the value of 80. And then service type could be node port because it's just a demo. Target port is 80 again. And then I can submit this. And in just a couple of seconds, I have 4 resources that were created for me. And I can save them to the folder that was created for this folder. And now after it's reloading for 1 second, I should see the ID UI. Before I go to the next steps, I just want to briefly explain the UI. In the left part, you have a menu with different tools that you can use, but I'm not going to go through all of them because then it will be on a 1-hour demo probably. Right now, I will focus on the files only, and then in the middle, we have a navigator, as we call it. It's basically a place where you will see all your resources in the different modes you are in. For example, right now, I'm in local mode, so I see the resources that were created by my template, and they are saved in these files. We can see a relationship with these highlights between the resources and the files. This is the part that Ole was talking about, where you want a tool that helps you understand the relationship between your resources. And you can see that with these links here. You can navigate. So let's say I want to jump to the config map. I can only click on this link and then I jump to it. And this functionality will also show you if you have a wrong link. For example, if I modify this and I don't have a config map with that name, then it will turn yellow and this is a warning. But I want to fix that. And another cool feature that we added recently is the graph view, where you can see even more visually your relationship between the different resources that you have. Finally, if you liked the templates for creating the resources, you can also use form editors to continue editing without having to touch YAML. So you can just use auto-generated forms, collapse and modify the fields that you want, and all the changes that you do here will be applied directly to the YAML. But now let's continue with the story that we started with. So we wanted some resources, we created them with the template, and now we want to deploy them. But let's say I'm still working on this customization. Monocle has a customized panel here. And if you're still working on a customization and you're making changes, let's say I'm going to delete these 2 resources from the customization. And now I want to see what resources will be generated from this one. I can click on preview. This is a feature that Monocle has where you can preview, sorry about this, where you can preview the output of a customization or a Helm chart, and you will see in the navigator the resources that were created by it. And for example, here I only generated the deployment. So now even here in the editor, I can see an error that the config map is missing. And it's missing because I just deleted it a couple of seconds ago. I will edit back. And the next step, so after you verify that it's working correctly with a preview, you can deploy it. So I can select my customization, I can deploy it, I will use the default namespace, I'll click on OK, and it should be applied successfully here. Now the next step, let's say, so this is the development part of Monocle, but we can also help you after this. After things are in your cluster, you want to inspect them, you want to see if everything is working okay. Here at the top, we have a widget which shows the clusters that you have configured in your kubeconfig, and you can choose to connect to the cluster. When you connect to the cluster, you will see this cluster dashboard with some overview information, and then on the left you have some kinds where you can see the resources. For example, I'll go to the deployment and I will see here that I have my Nginx deployment, and we can go even to the pods. I can see Nginx deployment. If I click on it, I get some more information. I can see the manifest, I can see the logs, and I can even go to the shell, and let's say I can curl for localhost, and I should be able to see that it's working or not. Okay, but this is the flow that I wanted to show. Basically, you go from scratch, you don't have any resources, you generate some of them, you understand how they are linked together, you validate them, you can use the form, the graph, and then you can even connect to the cluster and inspect it. So this is basically what I wanted to show, and next will be Razvan to show other parts of the UI.
I loved it. It's almost reminding me of like, I don't know, like a code editor, an IDE, but for Kubernetes manifest. This is awesome. But I won't interrupt for too long. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I can answer any questions now, or we can do that after the demos.
Yeah, let's do it after the demos. I'm
Okay.
highlighting all of them right now because sometimes more will come up. So like I'm just gonna do it all in one.
Great.
Okay, great. So thank you, Katalin. Just a second so I can share my screen.
So let me just Razvan, before we get started, just
Sure.
to kind of just to confirm what you said, Rizal, you're totally right. Monokle is really to help you for the entire life cycle of your Kubernetes configurations, right? From that you created like the template that Kathleen showed, it helps you then visualize and validate and make sure everything lines up, and then it helps you deploy to your cluster, and then it actually connects to your cluster and helps you inspect what's running in your cluster, right? So it does everything from the beginning to the end. So instead of once again having to cobble together plugins or other tools to do that, you have it all in one package.
Yeah, I'm really impressed by it, especially that y'all made it within less than 2 years. Well, with the help of contributors as well, but still. And then
Yeah.
I really liked the integration with the shell as well. That's in there. I thought that was awesome.
Cool. Thanks. Razvan.
Yep, thank you. So, as Katalin mentioned, I'm going to show you how you can actually validate your resources using Monocle, how you can use Git-related actions like creating a new local branch, for example, and pushing some commits, and also comparing between different Git commits using Monocle. So first of all, I'm going to use the clone a Git repo option from here, and I'm going to use some demo repo that we have. Perfect. So after cloning the repo, I can see all the resources and everything that is found inside of my project. And first of all, I see that currently my project has no errors and no warnings, but that's just because we currently have deactivated all the validations for this project. So just by going to the settings pane from here, I can quickly see the validation tab, where you can notice that we have different options for validating your resources, like the open policy agent, the YAML syntax validator, Kubernetes schema validator, and others. The first one that I want to enable is the open policy agent. I'm going to do that, and I'm also going to configure it. And by clicking on configure, you can see here a bunch of rules that you can use depending on the needs of your project. So for example, I'm going to search for a specific rule which doesn't allow you to have an image with the latest tag. I'm going to actually enable that, and I'm going to mark it as an error because I think that it's quite important to disallow doing this. And going back, I'm also going to enable the Kubernetes schema validator. And just by doing that, I can quickly notice that here in this validation icon, I see that I have 7 new validation errors. And by clicking on here, I can see all the new errors and warnings that I have inside of my project. And also, if I go to the editor view, I can see here that for my resource, some of those were updated with corresponding errors and warnings. So for example, for this Blue CMS deployment, I can see here by hovering over this icon that I have a warning and also an error. And by clicking on it, I can see here, for example, if I go and hover back at the line 19, I have this error because on this image, I still have the latest tag set for it. What I'm going to do right now, I'm going to fix these problems because I don't want to have them inside of my project. So if I quickly go back to my validation pane, I'm going to filter them and show them by resource. And for this resource, I'm going to quickly change the latest tag to be some version, for example, 2.3.0. And also I see here that I have an warning which is related to the Kubernetes schema validator that the replicas should be a number. This was set to a string. So we should change it and make it as a number. And we can also see that the errors disappeared also from our validation pane. Let's also quickly do this for my another resource. I'll make this a little bigger so you can see actually the name. So I'm going to change it to another version. Let's say this is my version for this image. So yeah, actually right now we fixed the problems that we have. We can see that we no longer see them in the validation pane. And of course, what I want to do next is create a new local branch so I can actually commit these new changes. So the project doesn't contain the errors and the warnings anymore. So if I go here on the top top of the application, I can go to creating a new branch. For example, fixing errors warnings. Let's say is the name of it. I'm gonna create it. And after it's been created, I'll just go to the Git pane where you can actually see all the files that have been changed inside of your application. So for example, for this deployment file, I can see that I've changed the tag of this image to another version. I'm going to stage the files that were changed. And also, of course, I'm going to commit this and let's say fixed warnings and errors. Going to commit this, and the commit is successfully. I see that I don't have any more changes. And what I'm going to show you next is another cool feature that we have inside Monocle is the compare feature, which basically allows you to compare between different sets of resources. For example, if I click on the dropdown, I can set the local resources, the cluster resources, or for example, in our case, I want to see the resources found in a specific Git branches and Git commits. So I'm going to go on the main branch, and here it's automatically selected the latest commit. And of course, I want to compare that against my newly created branch, the fixing error and warnings. And I can quickly notice that there are some differences between the resources, and I can just click on the diff button, and I see here that the replicas was set correctly to a number, and the version for this image was set to another version. This feature is also really useful when you're comparing maybe against your cluster, because, for example, you might have some problems in the production of your cluster, and then you just can quickly compare between the Git commit that you have and against your cluster resources, and then see exactly what changes have you made in order to create that problem. So yeah, that would be my demo for Monocle.
Wow.
Thanks. There's some really awesome stuff in there. Thank you. Let me just jump in. I get so excited when I see this. Just on the comparison, right? The possibility, like you said, like you should, comparing branches, but we also have users who really love this for comparing clusters, right? So you might have like you said, you might have a dev and a staging cluster, and you want to, and it's working in one cluster but not in the other, you can set one side of the compare to point to one cluster, another side to point to another, and just compare those, and you can very easily see without having to download or extract or anything like that. So this kind of possibility to troubleshoot across branches, across commits, across clusters, whatever kind of ways that might help, is super helpful in a more deployment phase or in a troubleshooting phase, right? So as Kathleen showed, there's a lot of features around when you're creating your manifests and editing them and all that stuff. And Razvan showed all the validation stuff. We did go into that you can create custom validations. So if you want to create your own rules for whatever rules you might have in your teams or orgs or projects, all that's possible to do. And so there's just a wealth of possibilities. And it's always, we want to cater to, we want to make everyone happy. It's like everyone, which is obviously hard, but we're trying to kind of find a ground where we've at a level where we feel that we have both features for people who are maybe new to Kubernetes and YAML, all these things, but also really features that are pretty, low level when it comes to that troubleshooting or the creating custom validators and stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it was impressive because like the fact that it had those like customizable validation rules that you can do, and then you can just commit all your stuff in there and not go to GitHub. You're giving us a run for our money, okay? We do have a couple of questions. I think for any of y'all who want to answer. The first was, how does Monocle manage validation across different versions of Kubernetes?
I can answer this one. So we can download any schema for any version of the Kubernetes. You can select it within the app, and then we will validate based on that schema. And we also want to give the user some warnings when maybe they have a schema selected in the tool and they connect to a cluster that doesn't have the exact same schema. We will notify them. And we also try, when we see a change of the schema in the validation tab, we will indicate that, okay, you changed the schema and now you introduced this number of errors, and you can go through the errors and see exactly what you introduced.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you. And then I did see a couple of questions of people asking, what project is this? Or they came in late. Well, we have a recording. This project is called Monocle. It helps you to, I hope I'm saying this right, like manage your Kubernetes manifest files or YAML manifest files, because like there's all these different tools that you have to put together to make it easy. You can do this all in one. Yes, there is a recording. Like this is being recorded right now. So if you wanted to rewatch it later, you can on YouTube, on LinkedIn Live, and on Twitch. And so really cool. There's some more questions that I saw come in that I thought were cool. Someone said, and this is like, I don't know that much about Kubernetes, so apologies for any of my limitations. Someone says, how can I create a custom OPA policy validation?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I can answer this one as well. Currently, we have a CLI. This is a tool that it's right now separate. It has the same functionality of validation that Monocle does, but we also packaged it in a CLI, and that one right now supports custom validators as well. We are planning to add them to the desktop, but we need to work on some nice UI where you can create those policy validators. But until then, you can already create some custom ones in the CLI. And those ones can even be written in TypeScript. We've created a nice interface around how to validate your resources writing TypeScript code. So yeah, maybe we'll have a demo at some point with that.
That's really awesome. Someone said, what are the audit capabilities, specifically schema and hardware? I don't know if this is...
Not sure. I don't understand, to be honest.
Okay, cool. Feel free to clarify more. This is also like my limitation of Kubernetes. I'm like, maybe that exists.
Yeah, maybe we're missing something important here.
Cool.
It's definitely possible.
Someone said, and I think you kind of went over this, but I this is fine to reiterate. They said, why not just use Kind to manage my YAML manifest files? we went over it kind of in the beginning where we said, you could use other tools, but what makes
So when I hear kind, I'm thinking Kubernetes in Docker. So it's a way of running Kubernetes inside Docker. So and that for me is a place where you deploy your manifests, right? To run your Kubernetes applications. So you can definitely use kind together with Monocle, right? So just as both Kathleen and Razvan showed, you can create and manage your manifest, and then you can connect to your kind cluster locally and deploy to kind or to any other cluster. Maybe there are other tools called kind that do other things, and I apologize if that's the case, but that's kind of what I was thinking when I saw your question.
Okay, cool. And someone said, is it possible to manage entire clusters with Monocle? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the short answer is yes, and you can also manage multiple clusters, like we said with the compare feature. If you want to maybe sync the state between two clusters, you can actually do that directly in Monocle, because you have that view where with two columns you see the resources, you see the differences, but we also give you, Razvan didn't show it, but we have some actions to deploy directly from one cluster to another. So we make it really easy for you to work with the clusters.
That's cool. Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we were showing in the demo, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Just like someone asked this question more than once, and they're saying the answer is yes, but I do want to just acknowledge them. Is it compatible with Kubernetes, or is it only compatible with any YAML file, for example, a Spring Boot configuration or config?
Kathleen, do you want to, or should I?
Well, I would say it's only Kubernetes. You can definitely use other YAML, but then the UI has a lot of features around resources, and specifically Kubernetes resources. And basically, the resource for us is like a special unit in the app, and we use it everywhere in all the panels. With YAML, only YAML files, then you will lose a lot of capabilities, and I'm not sure if maybe you can write some TypeScript validators that could work for your YAML files if you really want that, but it's not specifically for that.
I think definitely for now we're focusing on Kubernetes related configuration files. So it's but we're an open source project and we want to make our users happy. So head over to GitHub, open some feature requests, or talk to us on Discord, and happy to discuss how that how working with Spring Boot YAML files or any other YAML files could fit into the story of Kubernetes, managing Kubernetes applications, and it's definitely something we would consider.
Cool. And then the person that asked the question earlier, Marcia, she's clarifying more. This is again my limitation of Kubernetes, but they're saying like apologies, but they're trying to figure out if there's a distinction between the cloud service provider hardware, Azure, AWS, and other. I think they earlier were asking like what are the audit capabilities? Yeah. Maybe you all don't have that yet? Maybe I don't know.
No, we're not at the hardware level. So we connect to any Kubernetes cluster basically, or we try. And then what hardware that's running on is kind of beyond us at this point. And I don't know if there's any standardized way to figure that out. I don't think so, but I might be wrong.
Well, I could mention a feature. It's still work in progress, but we plan to release it in partnership with another open source project, and it's related to the hardware in a sense that it will try to calculate the cost of running your Kubernetes in the cluster, and we will have that functionality soon. So other than that, maybe just some validation on the requests of containers for CPUs and RAM, and you can also see how much is used. So yeah, that's I think the most that we'll do for now.
Cool. I'll just highlight a couple of comments that seemed pretty positive. Someone said this looks like a simpler version of OpenShift. It would be on my inspiration list of GitHub repositories. Validations are so useful. Somebody else had a shout out to Kathleen. They said, "Go, Kathleen." Is that your friend, maybe?
I don't know.
Or maybe a fan that loves your work. And then
there was a question. Let me just was that sorry, Srikant.
This
one.
yeah.
Similar capability to integrate the CI to validate the config. Yes, so the Monocle CLI that was mentioned it can definitely be integrated into your CI/CD workflows on GitHub with a GitHub action. We also have a separate project where there's a cloud version of Monocle, but we're not going to talk about that here. That also has a GitHub bot, which does all the validations that you saw as part of your GitHub workflows. But it's an adjacent project. But the CLI that we talked about earlier is definitely something that you could automate as part of your CI/CD.
Awesome. That was great highlighting that question. I totally missed it. That was a good one. All right. There are a couple people that were asking, like, how could, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, but how can they contribute to this project if they were interested?
I can answer this question.
Yeah.
Well, the easiest way for contributing on Monocle is to directly go to our repo on GitHub, and on the issues list, we label most of our issues for contributors with a good first issue label.
Mhm.
So basically, anyone who wants to contribute to Monocle can simply just go to an issue with that label and just say, "Hey, I want to contribute and work on this issue." And from there, some of the developers working on Monocle will respond and will help the user with anything he needs in order to solve the issue.
Awesome. Great. So if people were wondering what's the repository, I have it on the screen below. I apologize, I can't put links into the comments. We have a limitation on GitHub. It's just going to turn it into asterisks. Okay. So there's actually a question in the chat, which is actually pretty similar to what I like to ask. And it's what have been the most challenging things in regards to like creating Monocle? And I usually ask, like, what are the challenges that y'all have encountered as maintainers?
I can start there. So there's plenty of challenges when you're starting an open source project. I think one of the biggest ones, I think, for early projects is just getting people to notice you, getting people to use the project, getting feedback, engaging with users. There's so many tools out there that are fighting for the attention of developers and engineers are super busy doing all great stuff, and they, especially with a tool like this, they feel like, oh, I already have an IDE, I'm good with that, and they don't maybe invest the time or have the time to kind of explore if this could be something that delivers on its promise of making things easier for you. So it is an uphill battle for most open source projects. Initially, just unless you're kind of associated with a big company, right? If you're where you have that brand behind you, or you have other open source projects that you can piggyback off. So that's really a big challenge. And out of that, I would recommend anyone to really invest time into, I don't know if you call it DevRel or whatever, advocates, blogging, engaging with others on Slack, in other communities, making noise about your project. It is much more important than building the project itself, and not to downplay all the creative juices out there, but if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to use it in the end. So it's a balance, right? And it's this balance of how much do you invest into the project itself, coding, versus advocating and building the ecosystem. And it's kind of, one push, it's the chicken and the egg problem a little bit, but it's definitely something that I think I've seen a lot of projects underestimate the value of DevRel and of advocacy and the need for that. So that's been a big challenge. Now we've come to a place where I think people starting to recognize the name, and they've heard about it, and they might give it a try, and maybe they didn't like it first, but then they'll come back 6 months later and try it again. So, but that's really one of the big challenges. Then there's technical challenges, of course, right? As it's growing pains, right? The project grows, people start using it for things that you didn't expect, or for clusters that are much larger than you thought, and that's kind of where once again, we're so grateful for people reaching out and telling us, hey, it doesn't work with this. It could be better here. Could you add this? And helping us improve. And so thankful for any feedback, right? For the people. And so that's kind of something that another challenge we've had. Sorry, I just continue talking. Kathleen, Razvan, do you want to add any other kind of challenging things that you feel that you've had with the project?
Yeah, sure. I was just thinking right now, and one challenging thing that we have is keeping the our documentation up to date,
Mm.
because we also are trying to deliver new features, and we need to have those features really well documented in order for the user to know about them and know exactly how to use them. I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, and I think I already mentioned it, but during development, I think it's challenging. You get a lot of feedback, which is very valuable, and then you realize maybe you didn't think exactly right in the first try with the feature, and then you're gonna have to completely change what you worked
Mm.
on a few months ago. But yeah, that's part of it, and it's always great to get feedback.
Yeah, that's really a great point, Kathleen. It's really, it's first when we can have all these thoughts and ideas about how we think this problem should be solved based on our own, but then it's first when you talk to actual users that you get understand how it should be solved, right? Or that you get a more holistic picture, and being prepared to then say, oh, I guess I was wrong, or kind of maybe that's not the perfect way of doing it, but also sometimes holding your course, right? It's kind of it's a middle ground, between being catering to the needs and the asks of the users versus having maybe a vision, kind of this is how you should be doing it, and then finding that middle ground. It can be really tricky, but I think the key is once again talking to users and engaging and listening, and then obviously having a great team around you.
I never thought about that one as a challenge. Like, yeah, you could go on a path and you're like, we're gonna make these features, and then the users are like, we don't want that. So that was a good call out. And then also, um, on the DevRel part, I always try to tell developers about that because like you can. I thought that was a great call out too because like you can make a project, but nobody will know it exists if you're not talking about it. If you're not like maybe making blog posts or talking about it at a meetup or a conference, like nobody will know it exists. And I know a lot of times like marketing, I guess it feels like marketing and it feels cringy, especially as developers, but it's necessary and there's a way to do it in an authentic way where it's
Definitely.
not cringy. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I love that. And then also um we have my friend that said I'm open to taking DevRel work on the side. I say
We
take
want to
what
talk to you.
he's like a DevRel at Stripe and used to work at Microsoft. So yeah, and
Awesome.
then this question I think is interesting again is what's been the best way for y'all to make noise and advocate for your projects? What's been working?
uh, it's I don't know what's the best. It's a mixed bag. It's
Okay.
everything from Reddit posts and to blog posts. What's the best way? I guess how would you measure that? Is it
Yeah.
the people who come in, the number of people? I think for us as an early project, I think Reddit is what's kind of maybe given us the most immediate kind of feedback, even if
Yeah.
it's sometime pretty, Reddit. So it kind of you never know what you're going to get, but it's at least a way of getting very quick interactions. I think Slack is also a great way to try to find Slack communities that are adjacent to yours, to the tool,
Yes.
or Slack or Discord, or kind of any kind of collaboration tool where other adjacent projects hang out. It doesn't have to be Slack, obviously. So I think that's been good. Then meetups is great, actually,
Yeah.
meeting people in person, especially early on, uh, because then you have them in front of you, right? And they you can hold on to them a little bit, and ask them more about their, what are your challenges with manifests and YAML and et cetera, et cetera. And I think the important part, I think, always when engaging with users early is to listen and ask questions, not to say, hey, look at this feature we've built, right? That's the second part. The first part is, what are your problems with YAML manifests and Kubernetes, and what are your challenges, etc. And then once you've had that discussion, you can say, well, why maybe this thing that we're building over here could be interesting for you, right?
Yeah.
Versus the other way around, because ultimately we're building things to solve other people's problems, and that's what's important to us. And then if we've actually succeeded, well, hooray! It's a win-win for all of us.
Yeah, so it sounds like you like forums and then even in person. You want to be where the people are so you can
Yeah.
hear what they're saying. So that's been working well for you. Um okay, cool. And then actually there was one thing Razvan mentioned, documentation has been hard. And I think there's a good call out for people who are watching and want to contribute. Go ahead to that repository and help them keep their documentation up to date. I think documentation is usually like low-hanging fruit that can help you to learn the project, but then also you won't feel as like, oh my gosh, like maybe I'm gonna break the code base or something like that. Help to fix a typo, help to do translations, help to if you started setting up the project and you're like, oh, this is a little out of date, like help to update that. Look at the issues that they have that are labeled good first issue. Cool. Let's see. I was just checking out this question. So I guess. Sorry, I got thrown off just because this person actually it feels like they're reading the list that I have. Like I asked about like challenges to y'all, and then they also said what's the most rewarding part. That's actually the next question I did ask to y'all. So what has been the most rewarding part of maintaining a project for y'all?
Well, since we also talked about users contributing to Monocle, I think like a rewarding part is having to interact directly with the users, and for example a user contributing to Monocle to guide him and see exactly what's his opinion and how he thinks about seeing the application, and working with him in order to solve the issues that maybe he has or other people are having. So I think that's really awesome when you are working with an open source project.
Yes, love that.
Yeah, and I think I will combine an answer to this question with the question that was before. For me, it's really rewarding when I join some communities. Maybe I'm on Stack Overflow on Reddit, and I just read about what people are working on, and then I find some people struggling with an issue that then I think about Monocle, and I see, oh, we actually solved this, and we solve it in an easy way. And then it's really rewarding for me to point that to the user, and when I get some feedback back from that user saying that it really helped him, that's really a great feeling. So I would recommend people working on their own libraries or products to just be part of the conversations, and then indirectly or organically they will find people that struggle with the same problem, and they can point them to their own product.
It's a great point. No, I'll just chime in there. I think the most hearing from a user that the Monocles help them solve a problem or works for them that's kind of the best, right? That's kind of that's why we're doing this, and helping them resolve issues, or if people just say this will really help me, or this is great. I think that's awesome. That's kind of the most rewarding for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that open source maintainers like to help people, and they feel like a certain level of like satisfaction when they're like, oh wait, my idea helped you out, like this is something I was struggling with. For folks who want to create their own open source project or build their own library, I know we talked about like making sure you're doing DevRel for it, but do you have any advice on getting started? Because I think it can seem like an overwhelming task for folks if they might have an idea, but they're like, I don't know where to start with this.
I would say, obviously, try to identify an area where there's a problem domain, right? So a problem that needs to be solved, preferably a problem that you've had yourself. Because scratching your own itch is kind of the best formula. But then don't try to go too deep on features and functionality. Try to get to something that you think this is good enough to start showing to others and getting feedback, right? So obviously it has to show some value, but it doesn't have to be super smooth. It doesn't have to be have installers for all platforms. It doesn't have to, it just has to be something that gets the point across of the problem you're trying to solve. And then go out to communities like Razvan and Kathleen said, Stack Overflow, Slack, Reddit, whatever, and say, hey, try to find people that maybe have had the same problem. Say, hey, I've had the same problem myself. I created this library or this thing. What do you think? I'd love to, and try to get that discussion going. And soon you'll find someone, just like Kathleen said, if you're having the problem, someone else is having the problem, right? So you just need to find them and get that discussion going. So I think that's really maybe the biggest thing there is really try to evangelize, advocate for your idea earlier than later, sooner than later, and try to get feedback from potential users.
Yeah, I think one viewer here is like supporting your idea, saying which stands for keep it simple, stupid, I guess. That says applies to all fields. And yeah, like what you're saying, like create an MVP. It doesn't have to be this full-fledged thing. Get that feedback from folks, let people know about it, and then people will come in and help to build that project up even better, whether they're users, whether they're people like sponsoring financially, or whether they're contributors. I'm going to quickly move to the last two technical questions and then go into the non-technical questions. What's an open source project that y'all admire? That's not your project, of course.
Oh. Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can start shortly. I really like the work of Tanner Linsley. He's developing libraries related to React in the beginning, and I liked React Table for a lot of time because he really adapted to the changes in the React ecosystem. He started with a version that was using class components, just to be a bit technical. Then hooks came out for React, and there was a new wave of libraries, but he refactored the entire app and was one of the first to use the hooks. And then now he's even building an abstraction over that, and his library is available for other frameworks, not necessarily React. So seeing how he evolved and pivoted to other areas, it was really inspiring for me.
Awesome. And this is the person that created TanStack, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Anyone else want to share an open source project they love as well? Or we're good? This was good.
There's so many.
Yeah.
There's so many that I think I'm just so impressed by, like the team behind. I'll call out Electron, which I know is getting some bashing nowadays, but I still think it's an amazing effort trying to provide a framework for building desktop, like applications. I think that project has also evolved immensely over the years. So kudos to them. It's one of many, though. There's so much out there. It's great.
There are. If someone asked me this question, I would have a hard time answering as well. Okay, really quickly, are there any GitHub products? I've seen that y'all used Git or like using like the Git concepts to like do diffs and stuff like that. But are there any like GitHub products that have empowered you as an open source maintainer? We don't have to do a demo since we're short on time, but like it's code spaces, GitHub Actions, GitHub Copilot, any of those that have been helpful to y'all, and how?
Yeah, I can answer this one. We are using quite a lot of tools from GitHub. So with GitHub Actions, we are running our CI/CD for releasing and for testing, and we are also using it to automate deploying our documentation. So when someone does a PR and it's merged to main on the documentation, we deploy it to GitHub Pages. So we also use GitHub Pages to deploy it, and then we use GitHub Projects to do project management. Basically, we use the milestones, and then we have a project with some nice views for each version, and we like to do it directly in GitHub because we want it to be public so people can contribute and they can see at all times what we are working on. They can give feedback, and it's been great. It has all the features that we need. And also Copilot. I think there are some people, myself included, I use it when I develop, and I think it saves a lot of time.
Yay, awesome. Love to hear it.
I'll just chime in on GitHub Projects. I think that's evolved fantastically over the last years, from being a very basic issue tracker to having a lot of features now that really removes the need for any other kind of project management tools. So kudos to you guys for there's so many things going on, I'm sure, at GitHub, but kind of continuing to make that better. And we use it exclusively for all our open source projects, and it's the only project management thing we use. And it's great to be able to do that in public.
And I would also mention that I really like the new search, that I think it's still in beta, but it's great. I can now easily search through the files. I also like to open VS Code in the browser to read the code. And there was one more, but I just forgot about it.
These are great. I'm excited that y'all are using so many GitHub tools, especially GitHub projects. I think the team will be super excited to hear that. Okay, I I ended up enjoying this conversation so much that I realized we're getting really close to time. So I'm gonna ask y'all like speed answers or speed questions. And they're non-technical questions. So the first is, what was your first programming language that you learned? We can go in order from Ole, Catalin, and then Razvan.
I learned, I think it was basic on a ZX81.
Okay,
This
nice.
was in the 80s.
For
Wow.
me, it was Visual Basic and C Sharp.
Okay, nice. And then
And for me it was C and C++.
nice. Look at y'all. I would be crying if I learned C++ first, but that's good. Like now you have a good foundation. Okay, if money wasn't an issue, how would y'all ideally spend your time? Whether it was having a job or you're just on vacation all day.
I would definitely code, love coding, and then I'd be, on the rest of the days, I'd be on my bike.
Nice.
Maybe I would travel the world and do magic shows.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm more of a lazy person right now, so I'll say I'll just take like a month off to an exotic location or an exotic island and just relax for a bit.
I'm like Razvan. I'm like, I'm not doing any more work. No coding. Goodbye. Okay. Okay. Besides Monocle, what's a dream open source project that you would like to create if you had the time?
Like to create. I'd love to create some games. Game open games. I don't know. That's kind of vague. Maybe some
Yeah.
RTS strategy games. I was a big gamer in the 90s. Obviously, that's what ages last century. But love to kind of maybe see if some of that magic can be recreated as an open source game. And I'm sure there's already stuff like that out there.
I love it. Catalina.
Well, recently I had an idea about uh, automation and habit building, and I think maybe I will even build it when I get some time. But it's related to using your phone and NFC tags around your house to track your habits.
Ooh, that's cool.
That's an idea that I have, and it might be nice to work on it.
That does sound cool. I love that. Anything for you, Razvan?
Well, actually, Ole read my mind, and it also big games for me. I actually also tried to create some games using Unity, but just like a beginner. But it's still like something in progress, and maybe I'll have some time to try that.
Razvan, we should talk.
Yeah, definitely.
It looks like other people are excited about about creating games too. All right. If you could only eat one food for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. One food for the rest of my life. I'll say sushi.
Sushi? Nice. That's
Yeah.
good. Kathleen?
Pork ribs.
Pork ribs? Good.
Yeah.
I'll go for pasta. I like Italian cuisine, so
Yes. Okay. Jif. Oh, I already
Yep.
said how I say it.
What's that?
I usually say I'm not gonna say how I say it, but do you say GIF or GIF?
GIF, obviously.
GIF. All of y'all say GIF.
I
say
don't know.
GIF.
I think I say both sometimes. I'm really not sure.
yeah, I guess it depends the language we are speaking. If it's in Romania, we'll say GIF, but if it's in English, I think we say GIF. So
Yeah.
it depends.
Cool. All right. And then last question. What's your favorite Beyonce song? But if you don't listen to Beyonce, what's your favorite song in general?
I don't listen to Beyonce. Favorite song is hard. Right now, I'm heavily rotating a song called "Lazy" by Deep Purple.
Okay, cool.
It's
Never
awesome.
heard of it.
Check it out.
I will. Catalina?
From Beyonce specifically, I think I like Halo the most.
Yes. That's a nice ballad. Okay, Rashman.
Yeah, well, for me, I don't really have a favorite song, but my favorite artist is Ed Sheeran. So anything from him is just perfect. Yeah.
He's a great, he's a
But
great.
didn't she do "Telephone" with Lady Gaga?
Yes, she did.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I'll go for that.
Okay. Good choice. All right. Thank you all so much. I know I went over time. I just really enjoyed this conversation, so I apologize. But thank you to the chat as well for tuning in. I want to just highlight a couple of links that you should check out. The first one is monocle.io. That is the project's website itself. So if you wanted to just like see an overview and like, I guess, see whatever other things you can connect to there, you can go ahead and go to monocle.io. And then if you wanted to contribute to the repo and you wanted to help make it better, whether it's the documentation or the actual code, I know some people had some ideas, go ahead to github.com/cubeshop/monocle. Thank you to the audience for tuning in. Y'all are always really great and very engaged with asking questions. And then also thank you to Ole, Cataline, and Razvan. It was lots of good good answers. I loved y'all answers in general. And people seemed to enjoy it. They said it was so fun.
Thank you,
So
Rizal. It was a
you.
pleasure.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.